In my previous video, I talked about some of the challenges men face in the Jehovah's Witnesses organization, but today I want to talk about the struggles of Jehovah's Witness women. I was born into the organization, was active for 30 years, so I can definitely speak to these issues. The following are 6 common struggles Jehovah's Witness women face on a weekly basis. Number 1, always submit to men. Women are second-class citizens in the organization, though it isn't explicitly framed or expressed this way. In fact, sisters are often commended for their loyalty, modesty, and time spent preaching. But this sort of validation is hollow and patronizing because in some way or another, a man is always dictating her life. There's several ways Jehovah's Witness women are expected to submit to men. First, you got the model wife. Model meaning she perfectly supports her husband as an elder or ministerial servant. She always follows his direction or the direction of the elders and the organization in general. She is truly valued and treasured for her compliance, even if secretly she doesn't agree with some of his choices, or any of them. Then you have the wife whose husband is a slacker, meaning he's starting to display subversive thoughts and behaviors. Essentially, she's married to a PIMO, someone who is physically in the organization but has mentally checked out. In this case, even if her husband is a good man who loves her and provides for her, he would be considered a spiritual danger, and she would then be pressured to prioritize the elder's final word over her own husband. Then you got really severe situations where the husband is emotionally or physically abusive, but the wife has to stay with him because the only grounds she has to divorce him is adultery. If he's really narcissistic and manipulative, he'll refuse to give her these grounds, or he'll find a way to do whatever the hell he wants and still come out smelling like a rose because he has elder cronies and other sympathizers who excuse his behavior. And then of course, when it comes to judicial committees, women are disproportionately disfellowshipped or removed from the congregation in comparison to their male counterparts. Doesn't matter if she's innocent, has mitigating circumstances that deserve compassion, or yup, she did it. He will get a free pass for that same behavior. Yes, men get removed. Men are shamed and punished too. But it is never assumed that a woman is innocent. If she's called in for a judicial committee, she's already guilty. So basically, no matter what the elders say or do, women are expected to submit. Did he divide the territory up in a really stupid, inefficient manner? He's in charge. Did the elders disfellowship someone and you don't agree with how they handled it? You and the other inmates still have to shun them. Do you have your reservations about a new policy or procedure that makes zero logical sense but will have a direct impact on your daily life? Eat it. Submission is next to godliness. Number 2, the struggle of single sisters. There are a ton of single sisters in the organization, and there are several reasons why. One is basic math. There's just far more sisters than there are brothers. Men are scarce, and because premarital sex is strictly prohibited, you have essentially children getting married by the time they graduate high school, leaving even less eligible bachelors for the rest. Another major variable is lack of compatibility. The problem is you're only allowed to date other Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, technically, you can date or marry a non-witness, but if your family are devout Jehovah's Witnesses, you're going to get strong opposition. The problem is you're attracted to what you're attracted to, and no amount of spiritual qualifications is going to make up for the fact that you just don't get a tingle when you mingle. And I know that a popular counter-argument to all this is, well, there's love and there's lust. Yes, that's true. Yeah, there's a lot of hot people out there with no substance, and that's not a recipe for a meaningful relationship. But you need lust. You need to have that initial spark, that initial sexual chemistry. For a lot of sisters, I'm sorry, Poindexter with a Bible just ain't gonna cut it. So what happens is you end up with the single sister who knows what she wants. She's holding out for the total package, but the longer that she stays single and she can't find him, the implicit assumption is, well, something must be wrong with her. She's too picky. She's too neurotic. A ball buster. Instead of self-aware, patient, and understandably discouraged by a lack of options. And there are other lovely sisters who are a little more passive, very sweet, theocratic, but he wants a little more spice than nice. Another brother might look at her and go, that's the one. And vice versa. Believe me, Poindexter's gonna get laid. Trust. Again, it all boils down to compatibility, and you can't just look at the spiritual. You might be a great catch, but he's just not that into you. And if that's the case, if that's what you're dealing with, why pine over someone who doesn't want you? And let's be honest, that other brother might be a great catch in many respects. Kind, stable, but You know, that's not the face you want to wake up to for the rest of your life. The bottom line is it's nobody's fault. The system just sucks if you're expected to fish in the same small pond. The sad reality is the organization is teeming with frustrated, reluctant virgins well into middle age and beyond. The air is thick with good girl syndrome because the men in power teach you that your value as a woman is entirely wrapped up in your ability to keep your legs shut. They set policies to regulate and suppress your natural development for unnatural periods of time, and failure to live up to this unrealistic standard is seen as a character flaw. Okay, you got a grown-ass woman who cannot get hers because men will punish her. Yes, men face it too, but more often than not, it is these sisters who are subject to double standards and slut-shaming when they finally cave and give in to normal, healthy desires. Number 3, no leadership roles. The organization is comprised of elders, ministerial servants, assistants, coordinators, all of whom are men. Women are considered the weaker vessel and are strictly prohibited from holding leadership positions. A sister isn't even allowed to lead group prayer if a male is present, even if that male is several decades younger than her. She would automatically have to defer to him, and he would lead the group out into the public ministry. Check out this video clip. This video clip is of governing body member Samuel Hurd telling the audience why women are unsuited to take the lead in the congregation.
You know, scientists say that the cranial capacity of a woman is 10% smaller than that of a man. So now this shows that she's just not equipped for the role of headship. Her role is one of subjection to the man.
Hurd's neurosexism was heard around the world, leaving both men and women justifiably pissed and unsettled. So I talked about this in my previous video about the challenges of Jehovah's Witness men. I don't believe that someone should be awarded a job or position solely on the basis of their gender or some other superficial characteristic. I don't believe that you should discriminate based on these characteristics, but I'm not going to automatically trust you in the name of representation. But in this regard, the organization is still stuck in the 1950s. And there are a growing number of men in the organization who are sick of this, who don't want to make all the decisions, who know that there are other sisters or women in the congregation who have more knowledge, have more experience, who are better suited for certain leadership roles. The world has female CEOs, entrepreneurs, Supreme Court justices, while sisters in the organization are still relegated to the kitchen and minivan. And here's the thing, some sisters really lean into their role. They lean into that submissive, what you would call trad wife nowadays, that trad wife role, and to each their own. But there are sisters who would like the option of being able to reach out for positions. Instead, it's 2025, and they're stuck rolling their eyes and biting their tongue while their elder husbands steer the ship. Number 4, pressure to preach. The men in the organization love to remind everyone that the sisters are a large army. This is an attempt to acknowledge and compliment them for their contribution to the public preaching work, while simultaneously ignoring the fact that this makes them the largest source of unpaid labor. Okay, you got a bunch of stay-at-home moms and single sisters who'd rather be getting banged than banging down doors, and the rest are a bunch of unemployed wives who don't have a hobby. And this is what they're expected to do. Unless you work a full-time job with zero flexibility, you're expected to be out preaching during the week in the public preaching work. I think that's important to mention because a lot of people here might not know this who are watching, who might not be witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses don't just go out on Saturdays knocking on doors. They're expected to go out during the week too if they have the time. You can technically go out knocking on doors any day of the week. It doesn't have to be Saturdays. So yeah, there is definitely this unspoken expectation that if you have even a scrap of free time to yourself that isn't being spent at a secular job, you should be using that time to preach. Number 5, gossip. So closely dovetailing this fact that sisters spend so much time together is the fact that gossip is a very real problem. Image is everything in the Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you are on the receiving end of that gossip, there are some sisters who are truly just diabolical, and they will do anything to make sure you look bad. The Jehovah's Witnesses are an extremely insular group with a tight informant system in place. AKA, these bitches are snitches. For the most part, generally speaking, you got women in their 50s and 60s who are bored and unfulfilled, going through the motions, and when they get even a whiff of new blood or some hot young thing coming into the congregation, their own skeletons and personal shit comes up. A really strong urge to monitor and control these young women kicks in. but it will be masked as wholesome association. Hi, we should go out and service. We should get to know each other. We should go out and service sometime. So what happens is you have these spiritual pillars, okay? These older women in the congregation that everybody looks up to who are actually toxic as fuck and are hell-bent on making you just as miserable as they are. At the very least, women of all ages in the congregation are under constant surveillance. The slightest misstep or human moment that we all have will be swiftly circulated and common knowledge just in time for their next Starbucks break. Number 6, the parent trap. No, I am not referring to Hayley Mills or the charming 1998 remake with Lindsay Lohan. There is a very real, scary situation that a lot of mothers find themselves in, and that's knowing they don't want this life for their child, but they also don't know how to reconcile this. This is tricky because two things are possible. They're either not fully consciously aware that they're in a cult, but they know they don't want to raise their kids in this environment. Or they did wake up, they do know it's a cult, and now they have a very difficult decision to make. This can play out in different ways. Like they might rebel in small ways. They might encourage their child to go to college, like my mom did, even though they know how the organization feels about this. They might let things slide. They might be a little bit more liberal as far as Jehovah's Witness parents go. You know, they don't care if you watch that movie or hang out with that person from school. And then you get other mothers who are like, oh, hell no, I'm not raising my kid in a cult, but are now facing a really heart-wrenching fork in the road where divorce is now a possibility because she just can't in good conscience repeat the cycle and subject her kid to the craziness. So there are sisters right now who are going through this, who have to risk the possibility of single motherhood just because they want to give their child a cult-free life. And that comes with its own mountain of emotional, financial, and legal implications. They refuse to raise their daughter or son in this misogynistic climate that is going to hold them back and will most definitely have a negative impact on their development somewhere at some point down the line. So there you go. These are 6 common struggles Jehovah's Witness women face in the organization, sometimes for their entire lives. If you are currently active in the organization, or maybe you're a former Jehovah's Witness watching this, what was your experience as a sister? Could you relate to anything in this list? What were some of the trials and challenges you went through? Go ahead and drop a comment. As always, thank you guys for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.